our licensed loan officer with NFM Lending. If you're just tuning in for the first time, we're here in the studio today with Glenn Blanco with the David Hoffman Group, powered by Keller Williams Ballantyne. We've got Preston Sandlin, expert contributor, back here with Home Inspection Carolinas. And we're rolling out this segment. We're going to be talking about 8 challenges that first-time buyers can potentially experience when they buy their first home, right? And we often talk about real estate and finance and all kinds of things, but today we really want to go through these key concepts. So Glenn, you're going to really help us tee this off. And the first one is, do you know how to select a realtor, and what does a realtor do? Sometimes that's a challenge for the first-time buyer. So tell me, what does a realtor really do when they act as a buyer's agent?
Okay. Well, when we act as a buyer's agent, number one, in both the state of North and South Carolina, we represent the buyer.
Okay.
And once that agreement is in place,
it's your attorney when you go to court, right?
Right.
You're the buyer's agent.
I'm the buyer's agent, and everything I'm doing, negotiating, is on behalf of the buyer. And what many people don't know is, at a buyer's agency, most cases they don't pay anything for our services. That's usually paid by the seller.
Okay, so let's back up for just a minute. So if you're thinking about buying a home, oftentimes the challenge is you may try to call the sign in the yard, but really you need to have your own representation. And you're telling me that you don't charge the buyer anything.
We don't charge the buyer.
Okay.
The seller.
And now I know that, but I'm really
understand.
emphasizing this here for the listener, because people don't understand real estate, especially first-time buyers, and that's why this is a challenge that we bring in. All right, keep going.
And just back to that point, people ask me that all the time when I first meet with them. How much do we charge? Am I going to pay for your services? And the answer, 99.9% of the time, is 0.
Right. Sometimes there's a small nominal fee for a couple $100.
Right. Every contract can be a little bit different. Every arrangement can be different, but typically it's all paid by the seller.
The commission that you make is paid by the seller selling the house.
Right. So our services are free to the buyer, and what we do is, again, representing the buyer, we help negotiate the contract.
Okay.
Help them find the perfect home, of course.
Right, drive them around. Starbucks runs, all that.
Yep, whatever it's going to take. And
answer a lot of their questions while you're driving them too. I'm sure.
Right, and what I find is, as you're taking them to see homes, things come up. That, aha, this is important to you. Aha, this is not important to you. So it's an education process for me as their buyer's agent, and also I think so many times for them, just realize, you know what, I really don't like a master on me.
Right, they can change their minds.
And
now you also help manage the home inspection process, right?
I do help manage the home inspection process, and I think we're going to talk about that later, but very often they get the inspection back and their eyes fall out.
Yeah,
and when you have a good inspection company like Home Inspection Carolina, they can help you with that process as well. I think we're going to talk about that a little bit later.
We'll hit on that a little bit more. Really, I think oftentimes just this key first challenge is that the buyer needs to understand that the buyer's agent represents them. It generally doesn't really cost them anything to have that.
Right. And
that you're really there as the guy. You end up being a friend, a mentor, sometimes even a therapist.
That's right.
But you're managing all the moving parts on behalf of the buyer. All right, let's roll to number 2. And the number two first-time buyer potential challenge is that they don't know what kind of home they're looking for. What do you mean by that, Glenn?
Well, I just kind of touched on that briefly just now, but we go out. My initial conversation with a buyer may be, I need 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, about 2,500 square feet, and a big backyard. Period. And we try to dig deeper and ask some more questions, but sometimes until you actually go out and get them into a house and start looking through the home, things come up. Like I said, we have a little child.
You thought you liked redheads, and then you dated one and said maybe not, right?
Direct all those emails to Chris. Angry redheads.
I didn't say angry. You said that.
If you don't like a redhead, they can change that.
Well, true. That's
true. But you can't do that with a home.
That's right.
But
you get my point, right?
Right.
The point is you may end up determining that that's maybe not what you wanted.
Right.
Well, do they want to be close to the city, or are they like more rural and school districts?
There are so many factors they don't even realize until they actually start looking. And I was out the other day with a couple. They had a young baby. I think it was 6, 7 8 months old, and another one already on the way. And they said, you know what, we need to have our master bedroom on the same level with the children's bedroom. They didn't think about that before until they started looking. So I don't want to be down here, the kids are up there, and I don't want to see any more homes where the bedroom is not on the same floor as the master. Whether it's up or down didn't matter. So things like that sometimes don't come to focus until you're actually out there looking at a home.
Makes sense. All right, so number 3, I'm going to have you probably tee this one up, Glenn, for. So the number 3 potential challenge for a first-time buyer who's buying their first home is what?
Getting their loan approved.
And perhaps waiting too
And
long.
not waiting too long.
Yeah.
We try very often to have them talk to you, Chris, before they actually go out and look at a home, so we know, number 1, that we're at the right price point, and number 2, to see if they're not ready or they can't qualify for a loan, put them in a program or something to get them ready, because they don't even know at this point, maybe they're not ready to buy yet.
Right. Well, I'll kind of jump in here and talk a little bit about the pre-qualification. So really at the end of the day, I mean, we all understand in this business that most people start their home searching, first-time buyers, by clicking and looking at houses on the internet, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't typically say, I think I want to call a mortgage professional, and then I'll start looking at houses, right? Either
Correct.
you see a house for sale in the area that you live in, or you go online. But oftentimes that pre-qualification is key, because Glenn is, number 1, not likely to put you in the car and take you shopping unless he knows that I have spoken with the potential buyer and gotten them qualified, because he's not going to spend his weekends driving people around if they aren't willing to take 15 minutes, sometimes 10 minutes on the phone for a credit check and a quick evaluation of income and assets to determine, hey, everything looks good so far.
That's exactly
right.
right.
Pre-qualification, I've used the analogy on the show before, is just simply, they look cute from the other side of the dance floor. So far, so good. It's a check, right?
Yeah. Well, and quite honestly, I think it's cruel for somebody to look at a house that they find out later they can't afford.
Right.
I mean,
It dashes hopes too,
Yeah.
right?
Right, it's very frustrating for a buyer to go to a home, fall in love with it, only to find out that it's out of their price range.
yeah.
Right, and then really the next key step is just making sure that that person actually moves from the pre-qualification phase into what we call the pre-approval phase, and that just basically means, now I just use the analogy, they look attractive from the other side of a dance floor. Well, now you're dancing close up, right? You're getting to know that person. We're getting to know, right? We're getting to know you. We're looking at bank statements and tax returns and income documents and so forth. And I just recently had one where the buyer worked for a construction company. We had a particular salary listed. It was a very strong salary. And when they came in to meet with me, they were actually a 1099 contract or self-employed person. Well, both the realtor and I said, I would have never guessed that the position he said that he worked, he said, I worked for this company as this position. It sounded like he was just an employee.
Mm-hmm.
Well, sure enough, he did make a lot of money on his 1099, but on the tax return, it showed very little
Because
income.
he had a lot of write-offs.
And we thought this buyer was ready to go. But once we saw the paperwork, we had to, shift gears and do some course correcting. And that's so important, because just because you think you qualify doesn't mean that you do. You need the lender to look at your paperwork up front. And it doesn't usually take that long to do it, but it's best to gather and submit. And the key point behind that, Glenn, and I'm sure you'll back me up here, is that when the buyer then goes to submit an offer, particularly in the first-time buyer range, there's a lot of buyers and not a lot of houses for sale or inventory. And so your offer may actually get accepted over someone else's, because I wrote that you've been through underwriting, you've been pre-approved, whereas another couple of buyers didn't go that extra
Exactly right.
mile.
It allows you to put in a very strong offer when you have that pre-approval, and it's not always price. There are other factors that, and one of them is having
It's
a
the
pre-approval.
reputation of the lender, making sure you did your
Yep.
work, all those things. So, all right, well, we've got one more to hit before our next break here. And so another potential challenge for a first-time buyer buying a first home is not being prepared for the upfront financial commitment. Glenn, why don't you quickly touch on what some of the upfront commitments might be?
Quickly, at contract, it is customary for the buyer to pay a due diligence fee to the seller, and that really is a fee for them to take the house off the market, or we
Right.
go through the due diligence period.
So here's $500. You're going to take your house off the market for 3 weeks,
Mhm.
and as a result, wait from
It's kind of
you.
like layaway. And then
Yeah.
it's
Right. And the due diligence fee, just so you know, if for some reason during the inspection process, you decide you don't want to,
Proceed.
you lose your due diligence fee. So that's really all you're putting at risk at that point.
Okay.
Then you also have your earnest money deposit, which is, again, credited back to you at closing, and that's held in escrow typically by the.
So it's held by a neutral party.
Usually party, typically, like at Keller Williams, we hold it in escrow as the buyer's rep in our account.
What are some of the additional costs aside from the due diligence and the earnest money that come into play that they pay up front?
Inspection.
Preston.
Yes.
And it's well worth it, and I'll let
Absolutely.
Preston talk about that, and that's another expense on the buyer's side.
Oh yeah. Well, you obviously, you know, you don't want your buyer to be hit with unknown. You know, they buy this dream house. You know, they get new furniture and all this, and all of a sudden their heat pump's gone and $5,000 that they weren't expecting to pay for. So you definitely want to get a home inspection.
How much would you typically invest up front on a home inspection?
You're looking around $400 or $500 probably.
Perfect.
Typically. But you know, average we probably find. I think one time I averaged it out. You know, $2,200 worth of repairs. So I mean,
Right, you're
that's
spending
a $1,500 cost
$400
right
to
there.
figure out maybe how to save money on those repairs and maybe renegotiate with
Right,
yourself.
and every once, and it is skewed. I mean, what I mean by that is there's some that are very little, but then you have some that, you know, oh man, you got a $10,000-$15,000 problem, and you definitely want to find out about that because you don't want to be hit with that on the, you know, a surprise. That's not a good surprise.
Right, makes perfect sense. And then finally, the only other upfront cost really is is typically paying for your appraisal, which I, as your loan officer or lender, will order that. That runs usually typically around $450 to $500. So all said and told, Glenn, as we look, you're really first-time buyer minimum investment is anywhere from $1,000 to $1,500, and that's being conservative.
That's being conservative.
It could be more, right?
And just to clarify though, if everything does go as scheduled and you go to closing, you do get back the earnest money and the due diligence.
All that gets credited
to you at closing. So
all the way through the
So it's
process.
not an additional expense, it's part of it.
It's credited back to you as you pay along the way. So
Correct.
perfect. Well, we hit 4 challenges out of the 8 we've got lined up here. Again, you're listening to Resh Radio Show host Chris Reshtar with NFM Lending. You're listening. Keep listening is what I'm trying to say to Resh Radio. We've got several more challenges to go. We've got Glenn here in the studio in Preston. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.